Give a man a fish, feed him for a day if he has the metabolism of a small child. Teach a man to steal fish, and condemn him to eternal suffering in hell. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to find your best anti-air gun setup. I won't be going in depth on anti-air guns because I myself am not too interested in the topic. Before even going into anti-air, or the act of shooting down enemy planes, I will say that a lot of the game doesn't require anti-air, in which case you should just put the stag on all of your ships for its 10 accuracy bonus, or the twin 134 for the firepower bonus. If you don't have stags for your entire fleet, start with the battleships and carriers before the vanguard, and give them to your destroyers last. Hazemayers give 5 accuracy, but they upgrade into stag in the gear lab, so they're okay to sit on. Hazemayer and especially stag work fine even as actual AA guns, so I just default to stag on most of my ships, even if the firepower from the twin 134 results in slightly more damage, as the twin 134 is also slightly detrimental to your actual anti-air performance. Now, I'm going to talk about how anti-air guns work, and then show you an example of how you can optimize your anti-air gun setup. The range and reload of the AA circle is an average of all the AA guns in your fleet, while the damage per tick is the sum of every gun. Let's do a quick example. Let's say that you have 3 anti-air guns in your fleet with the following stats. Note that the cooldowns and damage are not the actual cooldowns and damage of these guns with normal reload and AA stats. The damage would be the sum of 3 guns, which would be 462 per tick. The range would be the average of the 3 ranges, which would be 31. The reload, being the average of the 3 reloads, would be 1.0333 repeating seconds, which once you add the absolute cooldown becomes 1.9 seconds. Due to the absolute cooldown being as high as it is, super fast guns are not as good as you might think. For example, if one gun has a cooldown of 0.45 seconds and another 0.9 seconds, the first gun doesn't shoot twice for every one shot the second gun fires. With the absolute cooldown added to the cooldowns, the cooldown of the first gun is only about 75% of the second gun's and not 50%. Another thing that might not be intuitive is how the AA damage of each tick is distributed. You might assume that because each tick deals 462 damage, it could be the total that is evenly distributed across every plane that is in the circle when it fires, or it deals that damage to every plane in the circle. However, it's actually randomly distributed. It's not totally random, but I personally don't know how it's distributed, so it is random to me. If you are Giga Brian, you can read this wiki page, but I can't be bothered. The only takeaway you need is that if there are 21 or more planes in the circle, it seems like the total damage output of the circle will exceed 100%. I'm not sure if this function extends past 24 planes though. This suggests that having a bigger AA circle could indirectly increase total damage per tick as well, provided that a larger circle means more planes are within the circle. This is a plot of some of the AA guns. For the ones close to the middle, they are not all the same in performance, but they are the most balanced across the 3 stats. There are 2 major philosophies when it comes to optimizing AA that I'm aware of. Using all rainbow guns is not one of them, because it doesn't require any real thinking. It has the highest DPS by a wide margin, with the highest AA stat bonus, while also having a decent amount of range. The first philosophy is to put accelerators on ships with poor AA specs, and a damage gun on 1 or sometimes 2 AA carries. Accelerators refer to guns that contribute not primarily through their damage output, but rather by bringing down either the cooldown of the circle or increasing the range. So these guns here would be the accelerators. For example, the single 55 here is very fast while still having some decent range, but its damage is relatively poor. It's prime for a ship that has very low anti-air efficiency and stat, for example, Kazagumo. On this side, we have the damage guns, which would go on a ship like San Diego in order to make the most use of her high AA stat and efficiency, which would produce the greatest multiplier on the base damage. This way, you have one nuclear reactor powering your damage while everyone else makes the circle bigger and faster. This was the approach that I followed for a long time before the rainbow gun was released. The second major philosophy I'm aware of is to put the Roomba on every ship, which is something you may see if you come across some recommended loadouts from the Chinese community and forums. I hope I don't have to explain why this gun is called the Roomba. It has the highest range of all AA guns and good damage as well, but it has a very long cooldown. The logic behind it is that having more range is always more reliable on auto, and bigger range also increases the number of planes in the circle, which also increases damage output, just like reload, so it's fine to sacrifice reload for range. Well, I don't actually know if that's what they think. This is just my conjecture. However, all of this is just theory and calculation. We can simply bypass all of it by empirical testing. I have designed a test that is easily reproducible for just about anyone to test whatever setup they want to. Essentially, you go into any plain hell stage with only Vestal in the main fleet, and you put your fleet on auto until Vestal triggers her skill on herself. Vestal is chosen for this because the activation of her emergency heal gives a consistent measure for when to quit the battle without having to go all the way to sinking. This way, you only lose 4 oil per attempt from engaging the node, and no morale since you're exiting the battle each time. Additionally, Vestal only has anti-air guns, so she won't cause any unwanted RNG in how the node plays out each time. It is important to sortie her solo because enemy plane damage is not uniformly distributed among your main fleet, but with Vestal alone, you can always gauge accurately how much damage the main fleet is taking. If you're doing this in Chapter 15, you must pay attention to whether or not Vestal takes damage from suicide ships though, and in the rare occasion that she does, you must discard the run. This is not a concern in Chapter 13, but I don't know if there are enough planes to make Vestal drop down to 30% within one fight in Chapter 13 if you're testing good AA setups. Things like Vanguards, Cross Fleet, Support Fleet, Tech, and Cats don't really matter as long as you keep them consistent through the different AA setups you test. I used Guam and UVH in the other fleet for the cross-fleet barrages that assist with intercepting suicide ships. You can also use this same test for fighter setups for the support fleet, in which case you would want to keep your AA guns the same across different tests instead. I ran 4 different AA setups through the test, 5 runs each just to get started, but the sample size might be a bit low to draw conclusions. The first setup is all rainbow guns, then all rainbow guns as accelerators, plus a sextuple bow force, which deals the most damage per hit, then all Roombas, and then finally all stags plus 1 sextuple bow force. Stags are a good but not optimal accelerator, and sextuple bow force is the gun that brings the damage. All the guns were plus 10 because I didn't want to upgrade 4 Roombas to plus 13. True to theory, all Roomba was the most consistent, but it was also the most consistently bad. Neck and neck with it is the accelerator plus carry gun loadout. All Rainbow performed the best, but only a tiny bit better than all Roomba plus 1 sextuple. Obviously, 5 runs each can only point in a certain direction and is not statistically significant. To nobody's surprise, using mostly rainbow AA guns seems better than using mostly gold AA guns. But it is definitely not clear that all Roomba is the best setup, even when only considering gold guns. There are some caveats to take into account. First is that you may have even more help from carrier fighters in a real fleet, in which case the lower damage output of the all Roomba setup is already enough damage, while increasing the baseline through its consistency. Another factor to consider is if the planes come in short spurts, perhaps in a boss fight instead of Chapter 15, maybe you just need high burst and reload doesn't matter much. However, I believe that for Chapter 15, which is where AA really matters, this test is accurate enough and very easy to perform with any AA setup of your liking. There are many guns that have a decent blend of range, damage, and reload that could potentially outperform an all Roomba setup, but I can't test them all. My recommendation, as a privileged veteran player, is to use Rainbow Gun on every ship, and if you can't get them, just use really any gold gun lying around, ideally above 28 range and no slower than the Roomba. And then upgrade the gun that has the high space damage to plus 13, and put it on your AA carry. If you're curious about any specific setup in terms of AA guns or fighters, then just repeat this test for yourself, at least 10 trials each to get a good idea. Anyway, that's it for this video. Perhaps it's not as in-depth and straightforward as you may have hoped, but my goal is not to really turn you into parrots of my opinions, but to help you be your best self. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.